go live. All right, I'll go live. And maybe I'll start this general conversation again. So I'm waiting for the few seconds for it to start. Good afternoon. Right, I'll go live. Good afternoon again. So we're going live on YouTube. So two people have asked about the prototype development, and I was suggesting that when you're doing prototype development, unless you have gone far away already, perhaps you might want to consider mini development, because in major project we have three types. We have research only, research and mini development, and research and major development. There's actually a associated grading criteria for all three of them, for the panelists and as for the overall project. So for those who have forgotten, by the way, for the MS-ISM students, they are not required to do a oral presentation. This is AWESUM. But for our undergraduate students, they're required to do an oral presentation, which for us right now is in July. So for guys, all of you who are undergraduates, you'll be doing oral presentation. We call it the final viva. So that final viva is 30 minutes for the final viva. It goes on all 5 chapters. Chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, chapter 4 is the analysis, and chapter 5 is the conclusion and recommendations. If you've already done an excellent mini viva, which is chapters 1 to 3, you'll just be fine-tuning that and adding chapters 4 and 5. And if you have a prototype, you'll be showing that. So back to the question at hand. So at least two groups are concerned about the quality of their prototype being prepared for this panel presentation and for the evaluation by their supervisor. I'm saying, but put it in context. The context is this is a 3-credit course for undergraduate students. So yes, we expect a good prototype, but we're not expecting rocket science, so to speak. So in that context, I was suggesting that there are 2 kinds of things you could focus on: the usability or the functionality, because there's some existing software tools that have excellent functionality that have poor usability, and you have some that even have good usability that have poor functionality. And you could decide, oh, well, there's some kind of tool that exists already and we're doing an extra feature. Now, since I don't even know what exactly Jadil, and I don't know who the second person was who asked this question, is doing, my suggestion is that you want to think through what subset of all the possible features you're going to be looking at for your prototype. So in that context, you need some advice from your supervisor and other people. So I don't know if that helps at all, but I see Dr. Faces Shaw has raised her hand, so let me let her go. Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, thanks. I don't know whether the students have access to the rubrics at this moment. However, if we look at what has typically been evaluated at the Viva presentations for the prototype demonstration, we look at feasibility, which the maximum marks, at least up to last year was 5 points. Functionality, which had a maximum mark of 15, and the user interface. So in terms of the feasibility, we want to make sure that the prototype that you have developed is solving a real world problem, and that there is some sort of creativity and originality that you bring to the table that is not currently available at the moment. Of course, all of this is in light of what your research questions would be, and how you develop what the background to the problem, what the problem actually is, right? And the questions or the responses based on those questions. So the feasibility needs to solve a problem, a real world problem, and should be something creative and original. In terms of functionality, typically you would have outlined what your requirements are for the prototype, all right? Not necessarily for the overall project, especially if it is that you're doing a mini development, but what the functionality or those requirements would be for your prototype. And so we're looking at whether or not you've completed the majority, it says 90 to 100% of the requirements, and that there are no bugs during the demonstration, and that you've thoroughly organized your testing, right? Or that you've carried out your testing then, right? No bugs. It works according to what it is supposed to be doing, right? Also, we're looking at the user interface. So there's a 5 mark that's allocated to that. And in terms of the user interface, you want to ensure that the design is simple and natural in terms of how the user would interact with the interface, that it's visually appealing, and that it gives clear feedback in terms of user actions. So those are the things that we tend to look for the prototype demonstration. So I would say for those persons who are doing mini development, it will be a little bit more stringent for the major development, but at least for the mini development, you want to ensure that the prototype, in terms of your demonstration, works well, solves a good problem, and is visually appealing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. This might lead to students asking immediately for access to the criteria, but I think we might make some changes, guys. So to the criteria for this year. So as soon as we have that settled, we will definitely distribute to all the students that you might be asking. But what I liked about what Dr. Faces Shaw just said is that there are some clear criteria. And the other thing to keep in mind is that in the Viva presentation, you're not going to spend more than 10 minutes on your prototype. I mean, yes, you do have a few panelists who will actually ask to use a prototype like in the question and answer period to see if it's really working. But at the end of it, it's really about figuring out the scope of your project and making sure whatever the scope is, that those things work. So I just keep that in perspective. It's really about the scope not being too wide. So that's what I would want to say. Um, is Mr. White still here, or he is gone? I know he was at UTech just a while ago because I'm here and he's here, but he has left the meeting. Yes, was that helpful?
Yes, it was. Thank you.
All right. So the other thing I would say, since we're going to be having these meetings, the other thing you can do, Romain, both in this meeting on Wednesday evenings and on the meeting that Mr. White has. I'm inviting Mr. White's meeting. He calls it Intelligent Systems. If you want to come, and show your prototype, we are open to that. So I'm not talking about solving the technical problems, but if you want to say, here's what we're planning to do, you'd have to frame it. This is the goal of the project and all of that. You could do a demonstration and we can give you feedback. But that is more in terms of this is where we're going and is this sufficient, based on your goals and objectives. So that's certainly a possibility, but not just to do it right now, just on the flash. We're open to that as a possibility. Hopefully that could be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Come on. Anybody with a question or a concern, or everything is sorry, since I don't say, let me ask Janelle. So Janelle Anderson, you only have good things to report? No concerns or questions?
Good evening, everyone. No, Professor. We don't have any concerns at the moment.
Okay, so have you started collecting data?
Yes, we have started. We haven't started the interviews as yet, but we started distributing the questionnaire.
Questionnaires, okay.
Yes, Professor.
Okay, thank you.
But we already got feedback on our chapter 2, which we found very useful. So we are currently making the changes to that.
Okay, very good. All right, so Janelle shared the YouTube channel. Is that for last week? There's actually a series of channels. In fact, let me just remind everybody. There is a. Let me see if I can find it. There is a. Where can I find this thing? There is, since everybody seems to not seem to know it's here. There is sorry guys, I'm laughing because a student actually in an email. Sorry, I'm looking for something to send you right now in the chat, and a student called me hon, and I had to laugh. I'm like, I didn't know I was anybody's hon who's a student. But moving on, I'm looking for the link for the classroom. Somebody have the link? It's this. Here, let me do it again through here. All right, so this should be classroom. Let's drive down. So guys, I actually created a classroom for major project, and you're all welcome to join. And since right now we still only have what is it, 68 students, and I know that there's 175 major project groups. I'm going to put it in the chat right now. So if you haven't done so, you can join. All right. Is there anybody who never heard about this before? Sorry, this is really for major project, undergraduate, BSc computing major project. Oh, I just realized that there are people in the waiting room. Where's my waiting room? Admit. So is there anybody who did not know that there's a Google Classroom for the major project? And for just to remind those who don't know, the purpose of this is that we're going to be asking everybody to submit their slideshow on the Google Classroom. The updates about major project will be on the Google Classroom. So you can get updates through the Google Classroom. Yes, please and thanks. All right. Still waiting for, so wait, I might take it that nobody has any real concerns today? So I know I had some concerns, but maybe the people who have concerns doesn't want to share them in this meeting. I don't know. Let's see. Trishelle Constable, how is your major project group going?
Good afternoon, everyone. Are you hearing me better now?
Yeah, hearing you better.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm a member of Janiel's group.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh, so you guys were doing okay.
Yes.
And you're working on the
Collecting the data for
data
the,
as well as
yeah.
updating the peer review. Okay, all right.
Yes.
I see. Who is Nisa? Oh, Nisa is not on, so I'm still looking for Zoe. Zoe, are you the major project group? Zoe, that I know. I'm not even sure, you know. I have all these students who I don't know in real life. I only know them. Zoe says she's not hearing. Are other people hearing me? Jomo, are you hearing me?
Yes, miss, I'm hearing you.
Yeah, so how's your major project going?
Oh, I think our major project is going fine right now. We're just fine-tuning some stuff, communicating with our supervisor so that we can have a good outcome.
Have you started collecting your data?
No, miss, we haven't really started collecting the data yet, but we are prepared. We are sending out. We're going to start sending out some stuff so we can collect data.
Okay, so why aren't you? Have you gotten ethics approval?
Yes, miss, we did get ethics approval.
Okay. Right. So as far as I know, that there are 3 groups that don't have ethics approval. Maybe there's more than 3, but 3 that I think I know about. And there's some who have some questions about their ethics approval. That I think, as far as I know, they've actually gotten it. But all right. Steve Gentles, how's your project going?
Well, it's in its proper place now, and we're able to update our folder. So we're waiting on ethics committee feedback on the update.
Stephen, when did you send in that update?
The last, it was on the 21st.
The 21st of May.
Yes, miss.
21st.
Yeah, between the
Oh,
8th, some of the files from the 8th and the last, the actual ethics form was on the 21st.
so you mean you sent it on the Thursday?
Thursday.
When's the 21st? I'm actually looking back. The Friday.
Friday.
Oh, so
Yeah, the Friday.
You missed the ethics meeting. Wow.
Yeah, we had missed
Did
it.
you do that? Who's your supervisor, Mr. Gentles?
Mr. Panther.
Oh, I see. Well, okay, so you're now hoping to get some feedback. Did you submit before? That was your first submission.
We had updated some of the other files, but the ethics form, we had to make sure everything was written in accordance to the new title. So at that time, we're able to submit.
I see. Okay, Mr. Gentles. So I guess I didn't even put your group into it, so that means that would be 4 groups that don't have ethics approval. I thought okay, all right. And Mr. Gentles, are you sure that your ethics form is good to go, or would you like us to look at it quickly? Maybe we shouldn't even go there right now. I think next week what I will do is I'll just go ahead and we'll have a presentation on the topic. So I guess my question is, next week, do you think we should, maybe I should have a survey, guys, but next week, should we go ahead and look at chapter 4, or should we go back to chapter 3? I mean, there's so many things we could look at. We could look at how to do a Viva presentation. We could look at how to write up chapter 4. We could look at this point, it's a bit late. We could look at some of the concerns of the ethics form, but since almost every major project group has completed ethics form, or maybe something else. This group is very quiet today.
I don't know if maybe you could find a way to mix it, like how chapter 3 transition into 4, something like that. I don't know.
Well, I can say something about that right now, because chapter 3, okay, so in fact, let me just give a framework to everybody. So I'm not sure where everybody is. So let's just step back a little bit and look at what is a research project. So for remember research, as we're talking about, it is not as it is used in everyday language. So people use the word research in everyday language to mean investigating anything that you don't know. In an academic environment, research is about researching something that nobody knows the answer to. Go figure. And in that context, we come up with these things called research questions, which can be paraphrased into things called hypotheses. And in some disciplines, they actually call them aims and objectives. So possibly the aims and objectives can be reframed into research questions, and research questions can be reframed into hypotheses. Every project in the world must have one of those 3, or it's not yet an academic research project. But in particular, let's just go with research question, that one or more research question should be something that scholars, experts don't know the answer to in some form or fashion. A few weeks ago, I looked at different types of what is called gaps in literature, because there are different ways to justify, or different reasons that might lead you to say this is a good research project. Anyway, let's say everybody here is doing something that is worth doing as a research project. At this point, most people have gotten ethics approval, you have hopefully gotten very far, you have actually wrote a literature review. But in writing that literature review, as in reading literature, what you do is at the end of it, you not only have a summary, you point out in writing why it is that that particular research project is justified. So there should be a link to the research question or questions and the justification for the research. The methods chapter, which is chapter 3, yes, it have a whole lot of sections. So it starts off by telling you well, depends on which way you're doing it, but let's just go with the way I know off the top of my head. So for chapter 3, what you're going to have is things like the research design, which is it mixed methods? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? It must be one of those three. You're going to talk about the particular approach. Is it a survey? Is it a survey and an interview? So those are the instruments. Before you get to that, you're going to be telling the audience if it's a cross-sectional study or a longitudinal study. For those who remember what that means, cross-section means all at once, as in you collect data on one or more variables only one time. Or it could be a longitudinal study where on one or more variables you collect data more than once. So if you anything that's called a pre-post test is a type of longitudinal study. Anyway, so you have some things about the study. Then you need to figure out if it's about people, you're going to know who the population is and who the sample is. Depending on the project, you might have only one group or you might have several groups. All that's going to be in chapter 3. In the chapter 3, you're going to talk, in addition to about the instruments. You can have one instrument or many instruments. And then in an appendix to chapter 3, you actually have the instruments. Those instruments are always going to be in the ethics form. There's some projects that don't have any instruments, or the instruments here we mean is like instruments like how you're going to measure your data. So sometimes a project has data that already exists. So you don't have to have an instrument to collect the data. You get the data from somewhere that exists already. So in chapter 3, you're also going to have things like ethical consideration, methodological limitation, and probably that would be a good thing for us to do a presentation on before we finish. Because here's the long and the short, guys. Every research project in the world is not going to be perfect, and it's not perfect in part because no research project in the world can be perfect, because unless you have a census of every single data point, you cannot make complete accurate generalizations to whatever you're saying. And so because you don't have all the data, there's going to be what is called methodological limitation of many kinds, and if you're not able to admit to that, then your research is not yet a research project, because all research has some kind of methodological limitation, and perhaps you could go over that before it's time for major project presentations. Because that's, for example, that's one area that many people tend to fall down on. So by the way, show of hands, is there anybody who would like us sometime between June, sometime in June, to go over that? So show of hands right now. So only to, oh, four. Because I thought lots of people tend to not know this so well. Because when I teach this class, that tends to be the, okay, thanks. I guess we have at least 6 people. You can put down your hands. I presume the other people either don't chicken to put up the hand. So I know that tends to be a weak area. Right. So, and then you also, in the chapter, need to talk about the ethical considerations, which you'll write about things like that the research was approved by ethics committee. You need to talk about the particular ways that you're going to have informed consent. Yeah, you're going to talk about things like you're going to give informed consent. You're going to extend privacy to the participants in whatever way. Those kind of things should be talked about in the chapter 4. Those kind of things are all there. There usually is a timeline, perhaps a budget. Is there anybody in the waiting room? Let me look again. I see somebody. I don't see anybody. Oh, yeah, it's true. One person in the waiting room. Thanks for that. Yes. At one point, I actually had 4 people because I forget to keep looking. But there's only one person who was in the waiting room, which I've now let in. Right. Thanks for that, Bree. By the way, all of you guys wrote last names. I believe in last names. What is your big secret? You guys all last names. About 5 of you. Right. So the point is, I don't know if I give you the right order, but chapter 3, some parts of it, guys, tend to be weak. But you all at this point, I think, have a method. It's just that when you write up the method, you actually need to write it up well if you want to be at an excellent point. Because at the end of it, if a research project doesn't have methods that make sense, then the validity of your project is going to be suspect. In other words, can we say that there's any confidence in the results if the methods are not suitable given the particular research question or questions? So somebody had said, what's the link between chapter 3 and chapter 4? Now the thing is, it's really what's the link between chapters 1 to 5. So just a reminder, chapter 1 is the introduction, chapter 2 is literature review, chapter 3 is the methods and procedures, or some people want to call it the methodology. Chapter 4 has many different names, but let's call it analysis for right now, or it could be results and findings. And as a reminder, results are related to quantitative data and findings are related to qualitative data. If you have mixed or multiple methods, chapter 4 will have both. And actually how you write them up is going to be different. Is there a template or outline for the chapters anywhere? Yes, there is lists as to what should be in each chapter. The thing about template for the chapters, so there is a structure, and I'll make sure that by the time I come next week, I'll have that. I really can't do that in the middle of this meeting. But the thing about a lot of students tend to say they want to see other past major projects, and my concern about that is that maybe if you're willing to look at 7 major projects that were excellent, we could do that. But a lot of concerns is that students look at a good major project, they tend to copy it almost as much as possible, and we don't want you to plagiarize. So I'm a bit concerned when people, but yes, we can certainly give you what the key components is in each chapter. That should definitely be given to you without any problem. So I'll make sure I give you that next week. And if I don't, please remind me. So back to this story. So I was saying chapters 1 to 5 go together, yes? And when we're talking about chapters 1 to 5 going together, remember the heart of a research project is the research questions. So the chapter 4 is you have now collected data. That data could be secondary data. Secondary data are data that somebody else has that you got from somewhere legitimately, with permission. Or it could be primary data that you collect yourself, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. When you take that data and then you analyze it, it's in chapter 4. So usually at the beginning of chapter 4, you're going to write, or if you're presenting about it, you're going to tell the research questions that guided your research. So in chapter 4, the research question will sort of structure the way in which you present. If it's a project that includes human participants, typically chapter 4 starts with a demographic. Well, after the introduction, which will repeat to people what are your research questions. After that, you would then get into the demographics. Remember, if it's not a people project, there'll be no demographics. Remember, it depends on the context. Not every project is about people, so it depends. But if it's a people related project, after the introduction where you tell us research questions again, then you have the demographics, and then essentially for each research question, you would essentially organize the rest of the chapter based on the research questions, more or less. I mean, there actually are some variations thereof. And then especially if you have a qualitative project or mixed method project, there should be a section called discussion where you compare your findings with the literature and see how the data that you've collected qualitatively compares with what's in the scholarly literature. So the reason why I said it this way in chapter 5, if you recall, is the conclusion and recommendations. And just to remind you, recommendations don't come from your data. It comes from a critical reflection of what makes sense for people to do theoretically and practically. So all of you, everybody in Jamaica loves practical recommendations. So based on your research, you're going to say, oh, we think people should apply this in this way. And you also might say, here is some additional research that could be conducted in this field in the future. Those are the theoretical recommendations. So usually an excellent project at the end gives you recommendations. The more challenging parts, the recommendations tend to be pretty easy. Most students are really good. Most are really good at coming with good recommendations, especially the practical ones. Some of you tend to be not as good with the theoretical ones, so discuss that with your supervisor. But before you get to the recommendations, you typically want to focus on the conclusion. So let me just stop here. Can anybody in who is on? It's only 18 people plus me. So apart from myself and Dr. Fisher Shaw, anybody, including Mr. Wilson, can anybody tell me what's the relationship between the conclusion and the research question? Anybody? Don't all speak at once. Bria says conclusion answers what? That's incomplete. The research questions, question mark? That sounds like a question, not an answer. Is the conclusion a summary? No, Alex. I think Bria is on the right path, except I don't understand why she's asking me a question. Right, so like, I don't know if I'm saying, is it Janelle or Janelle? I'm not sure how to pronounce that name, and she has no last name. But yes, Bria and Janelle, I don't know if that you can correct me if I'm wrong, both answering the question. The conclusion answers the research question or questions. So if there are 3 research questions, all 3 research questions must be answered. And then the abstract, which you will only write at the very end, that abstract will be a summary of the entire project. So nobody is supposed to be writing abstracts until you finish, unless you've been doing research for years, and then maybe you can make some attempt to do it before you finish. But all of you are all new to research, please write your abstract at the end, not at the beginning, because the abstract is a summary of the entire project, chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Go figure. But what it really is a summary of, it's sort of a summary of chapter 1, 3, and 5. Because chapter 5 is a summary of chapter 4. Sorry, let me just stop right there. Can anybody explain why I say that chapter 5 is a summary of chapter 4? Explain for the rest of the students. You're allowed to talk or to type.
I suppose it would represent what you would understand from the actual findings.
Right, exactly. So Mr. Sim says chapter 5 would answer the findings and research. So it's not answering the findings. So the findings, I remember I told you, is about qualitative. I'm being really technical here, and results is really about the quantitative. So if you combine the results and findings, that's what we call it analysis. So in chapter 4, you both give the facts, and then you also interpret those facts. If you only state the facts, that's not enough. You must also interpret and analyze those facts. If all you're doing is stating, if all you're doing is putting some graphs and writing facts, that is at most a C, chapter 4. You must also interpret what the data means in light of the research question, so that in chapter 5, you take all of that data and then come up with, okay, we had 2 research questions. These are the answers to those 2 research questions. So that's why I'm calling the part that's not the summary is the recommendations are not in chapter 4. But the conclusion comes directly from chapter 4. Essentially, you cannot come to that conclusion if you don't first process and write up chapter 4. Is anybody here who needs clarification on that point? Well, not yet. So let's now go back, because somebody had said, like, wanting to know the link between chapter 3 and chapter 4. So let's go back. What is the link between chapters 3 and 4? I'm asking anybody to tell us. Remember, chapter 3 is about the methods. And chapter 4 is about analyzing the data that you collected, whether it's you collected or somebody else collected it. What's the link between those two? Well, it's sort of like indirect links. I hear nobody say. Chapter 3 is describing everything to do with the approach you're doing to answer the research question that you defined in chapter 1. So once you have defined the approach to the research, as in the methods, in between chapter 3 and chapter 4, you collect that data. And then chapter 4 is essentially writing up that data. So the connection, if there is one, is chapter 4 tells you we're going to do these things, and then that's chapter 3, and chapter 4 says, okay, we have done those things, here is what we found. So there's a close tie between all 5 chapters. So the head of school, who is still at work, not too long ago, Dr. Thorpe, he makes a really strong point that sometimes until you do a good literature review, that's in chapter 2, your entire project is very weak, because your chapter 1, which frames your project, unless it is supported by a good literature review, can be flawed. You actually need to be knowledgeable about the area and establish that there's some justification for your project, which you get from writing a good literature review. In fact, many researchers, as they write literature review, they realize, oh, I need to change my research questions. And if it happens to you, it's not the end of the world. So, chapter 1 defines succinctly what the project is about. Chapter 2 gives an overview of important literature related to your topic. At the end of the chapter 2, you would have justified why this project makes sense, and there should be a close, tight-knit thing between chapter 1 and 2. You don't read chapter 2 and go, huh? How's that tied to chapter 1? Because it is tied. Then chapter 3 is, like, in a sense, is almost more tied to chapter 1 than chapter 3, because you have defined the project succinctly in chapter 1. Chapter 3 now tells you the methods so that for that particular research questions. So chapter 1 to 3 together is a whole. So some people could call that the proposal, or we could call it many things. But chapters 1 to 2 to 3 defines the project as you have conceived it. If it's a quantitative project, it never changes. If a qualitative project, basically people can say, oh, we can wheel and come again, because the project can change as you go along. But maybe that's too much information. Right. So at this point, everybody here should have had a well-defined chapter 1 to 3. The thing I'm going to say to everybody who's listening to me is that even when you started collecting data, you might realize that you might need to go back and improve the quality of your chapter 1, 2, and 3 at the end, because you might have missed some key thing. So for example, when you finish your chapter 2, you realize, oh, my chapter 1 has some weak spots. You go back and improve it. It's a cyclical process. Anyway, I'm doing a lot of talking, and I wanted to get to student project ideas. So I think I've finished my little speech on, here's an overview of chapter 1 to 5. Anybody has a question about my quick overview? Well, either it was crystal clear or you're all good to go. So when we started, I was asking for feedback on what was going well and what wasn't going so well. I'm still asking. So far, I know that I need to come back by next meeting with the outline for each chapter, and we need to give you all attachments to the grading scheme for the final Viva. So that's action for me. Still waiting for, I know some people who are here are either unsure, or some people here are actually in dire distress. So I'm not sure why some people who are in dire distress are not talking. I'm not sure, because I actually know that for sure. So I'm still opening it up for questions and answers and concerns. But one thing though, if nobody has any question or concern, because it end the meeting early now, because we have till 7. But if only thing that happens that some people want some private consultation and refuse to do it in this public setting, we can always end the meeting 1 hour early today.
I am just a little bit unsure about what my 1 to 3 look like from the first mini Viva thing that we did, that we presented on. So if I get the template like I asked for, it would maybe help to see what I need to change from 1 to 3 and then how to move forward.
So hold on 1 second, Bray. So what about what the panel said? Did the panel give you feedback?
Yeah, there were a few things that we're supposed to change.
But it wasn't anything significant?
One was significant, rechanging our questions to be more specific. It was too broad. They said that it would make our it said it would make our the rest of our research a lot of work, or more than we can probably manage for the next couple of months.
Right.
But and then we found out that we were approved by the ethics board, so we created our questionnaire and started to get our data. So right now we're maybe looking like we're at this point where we should be moving on to chapter 4 and start analyzing our data and so on. But I don't want to move until I'm sure about 1 to 3 first.
Okay.
Which is why I asked about the template or the outline.
Okay. Would you mind sharing what your current research questions are?
Give me 1 second.
Yeah, man, sure, no problem. While we're looking for Bria to look up for research questions, anybody else with a concern or question?
Hello.
Yes.
All right. So good evening. All right. So apparently, my group members and I, we did not get to do the mini Viva before. But we have been keeping not very frequent meetings with the supervisor. But we have been going through, and every change that he said that we should make, we have done so, made the amendments and so forth already. So got approved by the ethics committee. I think
on, Mr. Sims, why did you not do your mini Viva?
I don't remember what happened exactly. I think I was at work because all of us work and we didn't get to present it. But the supervisor know that, and we went through like the chapters 1 to 3 already, and we're basically about to start collecting the data so we can get the findings and move on to chapter 4.
Okay.
So that's
what's your topic? What's your topic, Mr. Sims?
Interest and technology acceptance of e-service among university students. And you were the one who you were the
e-service. What is e-service?
That's basically something where we use online, like a web portal. It should either be named e-service or e-portal, basically, for like volunteerism through the website where students can basically do their what do you call it again?
CSP.
Their community service online. In light of COVID.
Is this Mr. Logan is your supervisor probably?
Yeah, Mr. Logan. So we are in touch and send emails. He can also see the changes that we make as well. And
okay, so Mr. Sims, I have a suggestion for you. So two things. So one is not a suggestion. First, I'm reminding everybody. So the final Viva, and there's a date. So what is it? Is it July 7th? I think?
July 6th.
July 6th.
On my birthday.
Yes, Mr. Sim. So if you want it to be another day, you can email now, asking for it to be another day. But it's an exam. So kindly ask for a day off from work on your birthday.
Yeah. More than likely, I will have that day off because
no, but you hear me. This is an exam, so please don't say you're working. It's like the Viva is an exam.
Yeah, understood.
I'm just reminding everybody. So that's the first thing. So hopefully you're going to make it so good that when you finish, you're going to say, "What a good birthday." Not true? What do you think? You laugh. So then the second thing, no, but I'm trying to inject positivity in your thinking.
Yeah,
so
true.
The other thing, Mr. Sim, since you did not do a oral presentation, perhaps you and your
feedback.
Group, hold on.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Just finish. Remember, the mini Viva is a 15 minutes. You could either come and do remember I'm being initially 15 minutes. You would come and do a 12 to 15 minute presentation, maybe at the beginning of one of these presentations, and we can give you feedback. But
Okay.
just remind everybody again, you guys, when you present, you have to be within the time. So the final viva is a 30 minute, as in 25 minutes to 30 minutes. If you go beyond 5 minutes, the panelists are going to stop you. And you need to practice so that you don't go beyond the time. So you might be thinking right now that 30 minutes sound like a lot of time. Trust me, if you try, you realize you spent months on the project. It's supposed to be a whole year. Half an hour is not much to go through the entire project. Right. Okay, Mr. Sims. So I'm
Yes.
saying that that might be a useful activity. And what would be useful is if it's only one or two groups, other people can benefit from seeing feedback on groups. Anybody here would object to one or two groups doing some practice presentations? And
I
sorry, show of
mean,
hands. Show of hands. Who thinks it's a good idea? Oh, we have more people who are like this as an idea than people who like the methodological limitation. Thanks very much. You can put down your hands. All right. So that's one thing we can do. Anything else? So back to, was it Bria, you found your research questions now?
Yes, miss.
Go ahead
So
and tell us what they are.
I lost them again. Okay. What is the digital literacy of the parents of children in grades 4 to 6 in the parish of St. Catherine? Is there an association between demographics and the interest among parents of children in grades 4 to 6 to participate in online training programs for computer literacy? And to what extent does a pilot literacy program improve the digital literacy of parents?
Yes, Bria. I don't know if I helped you with those. The only thing I would
Yes,
say is
you
that,
did.
hold on now. The only thing is that they sound too long. I think they need, sorry, to be fair, I tend to be a little bit long-winded. I think they need some shortening of the exact same points. But, and you just ask a question, the survey matches, or not the survey, all your data collection matches those three questions, right?
Yes, Miss. There we have a focus group with teachers to assess the interaction that they have experienced with parents and children over online learning. And then another one for parents specifically, given that we're really talking about teaching them how literate they are, how much time they have to do it, all of that stuff, and the demographics to know who is from where and what they do.
One more thing, Bria and Dr. Fisher Shaw, there actually are about, I think it's 4 different groups that are looking at community service and education. And Dr. Facey Shaw, who is here, she leads a research group in SCIT called Computers and Education. And I'm encouraging all groups that do quality research, and I'm really hoping that all of us do quality research, we could look at seeing how we could use that research to both help real people as well as to disseminate our findings, which include, disseminate is a fancy word that just means share something with other people. So you can share your findings by putting it in the newspaper, as in media, going on TV. You can do it by going to conferences, and you can do it by publishing papers. So I was saying all this to say that perhaps this could be something, because of course, given what's happening in the pandemic, certainly these kind of research projects are important. So basically, as Dr. Fisher just put in the chat, I'm in the group as well. Dr. Fisher Shaw and myself, we're inviting you to join the group, meaning, and it could be any supervisor. So I actually know who the supervisors are. So Dr. Fisher Shaw, these 4 projects are ones that I conceived. So one is being supervised by me, one is supervised by Mr. Logan, one by Mr. Thomas, and one by Miss Black. That are all related but different. Anyway, yeah, and they're all education related. So Bree, I mean, it's actually something. I mean, why do this project and not see how we can actually use this information to help the parents actually become digital literate?
I have a question.
Yes,
Sure. Go ahead, Mr. Sims.
Professor.
No, all right. So basically, I was the one who I think I texted it in the group asking if two research questions would be fine. We had three, but we got rid of the third one.
Okay.
But so I
It
just wanted to know.
um that question without a context, I can't answer. So even one research question can be fine, but a research
Mhm.
question can be so weaky to use a Jamaican expression that is not good enough. So Mr. Sims, without hearing research questions, I don't know how to answer the question. So would you like, just like I asked Bree, to actually tell us your research questions? So without the context, I don't know
Sure.
how to answer it. So go ahead and tell us research questions.
All right. So seeing that it's surrounding e-service and we're
Mhm.
focusing on university students and the relationship between that, the research question is stating or asking what is the possible technology acceptance of e-service among university students in Jamaica? And the second one is what's the possible technology acceptance of e-service among non-profit organizations in Jamaica? Like non-profit
Yeah, man,
organizations
I get
who,
that. So
yeah,
let me get the first part. What is the possible technology acceptance? That's what you started? Sorry, Mr. Sims, is that what you said? So it is what is the possible technology acceptance of university students for e-service and the possible technology acceptance of non-profits for e-service? Is that what you said? Meaning more or less? Mr. Sims, you're mute. You muted yourself.
oh yes, on my bad. The supervisor said that
Yeah,
we
man.
should
So
use possible to gauge it because we won't do like a final. We plan to do like a pilot web portal thing, but
okay.
and seeing that it may not be ready in time for students to use it,
Oh.
which we're about to set collect the data and what's their
Right.
interest, the level of
So here's the thing,
interest.
Mr. Simmons, Mr. Sims, sorry. I have two comments to you. One, definitely those two questions are fine. That's more than enough scope. But I have a
Uh-huh.
caveat to that. One is I don't know, but I'm a little bit concerned about the word possible because the thing about it, I think you probably are using a technology acceptance model. So whether it is TAM
Yeah,
or
we're using
UTAR2 or whatever,
UTA.
yeah, right, that one. So I just call it Utah, whatever how it's pronounced. United Theory of this is a long thing, right? So using that model, and that model has a number of moderators and variables that predict intention to use a technology, and then there's another variable that actually is the use of the technology and how those models go. In fact, yeah, I don't know if I should show it to the whole group right now, but how those models do is you can actually use it just for intention to use. So what based on what you just told me, you're looking at the predictors for intention to use. That's basically that's what I understand. And it's
Yeah,
not
basically.
yeah man, and it's not normally called possible use. So I think I would probably want to rephrase research questions, but that doesn't take away from the research question. So I wouldn't worry too much right now about exactly how the research question is expressed. I
Mm-hmm.
think that those are two good things to explore. But my question to you as a group is how will you get feedback on the prototype? Or are you just going to show it to the panel? What's the plan for that? I'm just curious. Are you talking, Mr. Sims? I can't hear you.
No, I'm actually thinking about it.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Mia, while he thinks, can you just let me in with another device, please?
Could I do what?
I'm waiting. I'm in the waiting room with another
Oh, you're
device.
in
I
the.
need to
Oh,
switch.
sure. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
man, definitely. Oh, there are other people here. Yes, I'm letting you in. Sorry about that. I think I need
Wait,
to. By the way, in these meetings, it'll be useful to get somebody else to help me with the waiting room because when I'm talking, it's difficult to keep on track on returning people. So at the next meeting, somebody wants to volunteer to help me. That would be useful. But anyway, sorry about that, Dr. Faces Shaw.
can I ask a question again, miss?
Ask my
Yeah,
question again.
yeah, you're the one that
Yeah,
you're
basically
asked.
what I was saying, it's two ways. Sometimes some people when they have a prototype, what they do is they show it in the mini Viva and they put a description and some screen snaps at the back of their project in the appendix. But when I'm a panelist, I tend to ask, so you did a pilot, but how do you know that? I just tend to ask this no matter what is there. Like, how do you know that the prospective user group is going to like this project? So I'm just asking you, did you have a thought as to, even though it's just a pilot, are you planning to get any feedback on the pilot at all?
Yeah, we can definitely incorporate that in the questionnaire or find out how we can bring it to the participants.
But hold
Even
on,
if,
hold on one second.
yeah,
When you went to do the questionnaire, not right now.
well, yes, probably we
Right. So
can
here,
just
so
sketch
Mr.
up some.
Sims, I'm going to make a suggestion to you if you don't mind. Are you open
Sure.
to suggestion? So my
Yes.
suggestion is you could separate your questionnaire that already been approved by the ethics committee, and then you could have whether it's another survey or a set of open-ended questions that you're going to ask to the participant. Meaning, usually it's either observation, interviews, or a survey, and it depends on what is most suitable for your particular project. I don't know which is more suitable, but I would suggest that you separate that. Dr. Fisher, you had a comment or suggestion there?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. Right. So, Mr. Sims, I think I've addressed your question. Hopefully, you're happy with my
Yeah,
suggestion.
and you said we should separate the questionnaire like with an open question, open-ended questions, observation, interviews, and those
No,
things.
I'm not suggesting all of that. Listen to me again, Mr. Sims. I'm not telling you you
Mm-hmm.
must do all of that. I'm saying I'm
Oh,
suggesting, and only suggesting that you separate finding out whether the two groups that you want to find out if they are open to using this pilot or this particular technology. I'm saying you separate that questionnaire from the actual pilot that you create and finding out how much people like it or are likely to use it. As in, it could even be called what is called triangulation. So you want to find out what people say about their intention to use something, and then when you actually show them a pilot, you say, okay, so would you use this pilot? So it could be people say yes, they like to use a pilot, but when they look at your pilot, they say no. These things need to change. I'm not saying that would happen. I'm saying your pilot and people saying it's a good idea is two different things.
all right. Understood. Noted.
I mean, it could be that the answers are the same. So it could be that you make a wonderful pilot and people say, oh, isn't this amazing? And the same way they said, oh, they love this idea, and the results could be the same. So I'm not saying they're going to be different. I'm just saying it's actually literally two different kinds of things. And that is where I go, oh, yes, okay. So in a sense, you'll be answering that research question about the technology acceptance of the students in two ways. You're both doing it with a survey, and you're also doing it by people using the prototype and then deciding how to get some data. And I'm suggesting it's not too many things. You're going to select either a survey or observation or interviews. Probably not all three. I'm just pointing out that maybe all could work, but you have to think through what makes sense for your project. And I don't even have to look at what your project is to make that strong suggestion.
All right.
Good?
Thank you, Miss.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And don't forget, you can look to see what other people have done for projects like that. And when I say project, I don't mean e-service projects, Don't forget, many people have looked at technology acceptance in many fields. I mean, it's big. It's in business, it's in health, it's in education. There's a lot of literature on those three areas alone, and probably other areas too. So the publications of technology acceptance of computer-based things in education, computer-based things in health, and computer-based things in business is a lot. Trust me, I've looked, so I know from experience, from reading. So you need to see how people have normally tested it. So you can look and see what are the methods people do to test and select one of those that's appropriate for your project. Anyway, anybody else has any other question or concern?
Miss, are you gonna have a meeting with me about the prototype thing? I spoke earlier.
Janil, I'm not
Yes,
sure what
miss.
you want in the meeting. Yes, I heard you. You're the first person who
Miss,
came.
Miss, you said you were gonna check if the prototype is kind of, not the prototype, if
No,
it's
hold on. So, Janil, let me go straight to you. What's the topic of your project?
using user behavior analytics to detect credit and debit card fraud in Jamaica.
Using data analytics to predict debit and credit card fraud in Jamaica. Wow. All right. So, what is your methods for doing that? Not how you're gonna create the prototype. What is the describe to me your methods for this project?
Method as in?
As in the chapter 3, give me a summary of what you wrote up as the methods.
It's a long stuff. I don't even have it on me right now.
So, Janelle, I can't. There's no way I'll be able to give you any feedback about the prototype without understanding the project. So,
Yes, I was asking if we're gonna have a meeting so we could have all of the group members here, because I'm the only one currently on.
Jalil, that's why I have a meeting every Wednesday. And maybe I could have a meeting with all the groups, but I am supervising 3 major projects. I'm co-supervising, if you can all believe this, I don't even know how many. Like literally, I'm co-supervising many, and then there are 3 groups that right now their supervisors meeting them with them very little. That's why I'm having this meeting now. Your whole group could have come. And so I'm suggesting you invite your entire group members to come next week, have a 10-minute presentation where you summarize what your project is about, and then either show the prototype or ask what's the problem. And you can do that next week, Wednesday.
Yes, miss, that sounds excellent.
Excellent, good. So we'll look forward to that next week, and make sure it's at least not just you, make sure as many of your group come as possible. So you know why that is good for everybody, guys? Is because when only one person is here from a group, and then Eames recorded, you don't get the same sense when only 1 or 2 of you are here. So, for example, I'm quite concerned. I noticed Mr. Gentles has come to a particular other research meeting, and it is typically only him. And I wanted to know where the other people. And it's not about him. I'm not taking to take on anybody. Groups are groups. It's not just one person. So the only way you're going to do a group project as an undergraduate is to have people pulling their weight. And if it's usually it's not at least fair you're pulling your weight, you're going to have this is the truth. You're going to have a rough time. Dr. Fisher Shaw, am I not speaking the truth?
I missed that just now, Miss Muir.
I just said if you don't have at least 3 people pulling weight in an undergraduate project, you tend to have a pretty rough time.
Oh, definitely so.
So, and by the way, guys, we're not advocating for people who don't do any work to be passing the project. And for example, when I'm the supervisor and I see people do some work, I am happily giving people the grades depending on their quality of participation, not just even effort. So it's a combination of the quality and the effort that will lead to your grade. But the quality is actually much more important than the effort. Anyway, so Jelly, we look forward to your contribution, you and your group's contribution next week.
Miss, from chapter 1 to, or just a prototype?
Listen to me again, Jalil.
Yes, miss, I'm writing.
Listen to me carefully. You're going to do at least a 10-minute presentation. So if you don't explain what is the, I don't know if I want to tell you to do chapter 1 to 3, but what I'm trying to say is you need to, essentially I'm saying present chapter 1 to 3. In other words, if you don't present the background of your project, which is chapter 1, and the method of your project, chapter 3, there's no way I can sensibly make a comment about your prototype. Because a project is framed by that. I mean, as it is, what's the topic again, Jadid? I've not forgotten already. Oh, it was about debit and credit card. And what you wanted to verify if there's fraud?
Check, as in not verify, but test for fraud.
Test for fraud.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, Jelly, while we're here, how is that different than what already exists? Doesn't isn't there some testing right now by the credit card companies across the world to reduce fraud?
I mean, this one is generic based on the user. What others are doing is they try to test and make cases for general, but this one is using the user, how the user is going to detect the user pattern to try to detect the fraud.
And
It's
Jalil, how is that different? I don't understand. Sorry, let me just give you an exact example.
I mean, finding
Hold on,
fraud.
look, let me give you an example, Jalil. I am so old that over 20 years ago, see, I'm not young, over 20 years ago when I had an American Express card while I was in the US, and I gave it up when I got back to Jamaica. And I was working my first full-time job, and I decided after months of working really hard that I deserved, I don't know what I deserved, but I decided I deserved something for all this hard work and long hours. And even the doctor told me I was working too hard, my first full-time job. So I went off one weekend and started spending money with the credit card. And at some store, it wasn't that much money, but it was unusual for my pattern. At some store, they told me I had to speak on the phone to somebody, and they started asking me a whole bunch of questions. So I said, "Excuse me, why are you asking me questions?" Well, there's some unusual pattern. And Jenny, this was 20 something years ago. So I'm trying to understand if 20 years ago, American Express could recognize that I was doing unusual activity, and I presume that company, I'm just wondering, I'm not saying you're not, what is particularly novel about your user, your attempt to track user behavior that hasn't been done before? Just curious. I mean, it sounds like an important project, but I'm just wondering, how do you know that the particular patterns that you're looking for is different? Is that you've read articles on this? I'm just trying to understand the justification of your project. I understand it's very important because credit card and debit card fraud is certainly something that is increasing, it seems. So I understand the practical significance of the project, but I'm just curious as to back to your methods. It's really a method question I'm asking you. Do you understand, Janine?
Yes, miss.
Okay, so back to my story. Before we get to here's what we're doing, if you don't have a frame, so you know what? Now I hear your thing. I'm going to suggest that next week before everybody else, you and your group is going to come and do a chapter 1 to 5, 1 to 3. Make sure, Jalil, that you do it in less than 15 minutes. At the end of that, we can talk about the prototype. So we're going to start with that. Please don't believe. We're going to start with your project.
All right, miss. Thank you.
How that sound?
Sounds good.
Right. So so you already did a mini viva, right?
Yes, miss.
Good. And what was the what was the biggest 1 or 2 takeaways from the panel?
I mean, the lady was mainly.
You only had one person?
Yeah.
Okay. So what did the panelists say?
I mean, she was mainly concerned with the research question. She was suggesting that it have to link to chapter 3, and she was even asking about the prototype, asked if we have it with us. So it was a bit hectic in there.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, it's a little bit tricky for me to know how good it is. So we'll wait and see next week, and then I can give feedback. Because really, it's difficult to give feedback, and if you just talk straight about the prototype, it's just going to be a bit of a challenge. You see, the prototype has to be in the context of the project. Remember, if what you're doing, and in fact, even if you're doing, let's say you're in an advanced software engineering class, at the end of it, you still will need to justify why your approach to problem solving is either different or better. Because if it's neither different or better, we can just reuse what somebody has done before, unless it is that what you're trying to do, in fact, in software engineering, it could be a reason. So maybe yours is cheaper. The thing is that when it's cheaper, we don't normally call that research. We could call it development. So I don't know if Miss Dr. Faces Shaw has a comment on that. So usually if it's just going for cheaper, that's like a software engineering project. Do we have scope in this project for things that are just more frugal, Dr. Pace's show? Any comment on that?
No, but it depends on how it's been applied. In other words, it may have been done in some other country or somewhere else, but you want to see how it responds here, or they may have used a different approach for the analytics as he was suggesting. And now you want to see how this particular approach applies.
Right.
So you have to look at it in terms of context. What different is it that you're bringing to the table, which is where the literature review would have helped to provide those gaps, right? To say that, okay, the authors recommended that it be applied in this discipline, or that, other approaches be used. And then in your findings or results, you could then indicate that, within this context, as suggested by so and so, here is what we have found, which differs from or is similar to the others that have been done. So the context, I think, in which it is applied could be the differentiating factor.
Yes, miss. The thing is, it's not currently using in Jamaica, so that's where we're taking it from.
Right, and if you have the literature to suggest that.
Jenny, you sure it's not being used in Jamaica?
Which is why I'm suggesting that if you have the literature to suggest
maybe
that.
Are you saying that a particular technique is not being used in Jamaica?
Yes, miss.
Okay, I see. All right, so then,
right.
Sorry, if you can present that to us succinctly next week, and by the way, that'd be good practice for you when you're going to do it in about a month from now. So it's it's not so it'll be good practice.
Thank you very much.
So we're now down to just 11 of us. Are we finishing early today? It's 20 minutes to 7. We don't have to go to 7 enough. We didn't have any formal presentation today, so usually we have a presentation before we take students' concerns. I decided to not do that today, just to go through concerns. But I actually expected some students to bring up their issues, but they look as if they don't want to bring it up in front of everybody else. Any other concerns or questions?
Good day, Miss Mayor.
Good day, Roger.
Was wondering if I could meet you face to face one of these days.
Face to face?
Yes.
On what is the issue, Roger? Is it to a major project?
Yes, Miss.
What is the nature of the issue?
The project itself. Project everything, Miss.
Let's be a little bit more precise. Is it, let's go into some general things. Is it you haven't reached any far? Is it your supervisor? Is it you don't know what to do? Just you're so vague. I don't even know what's the nature of the issue.
Basically everything. I mean, supervisor, not members, and everything. Just everything.
So let me just go. What's the topic of your project again?
Strategic application of IT and
okay, right. So I sent your group, I think last week you had reached out to Dr. Fisher, but did you guys didn't meet with her?
Yeah, I did.
You met with
yes,
her?
I did.
Oh, you met
Yes,
with her?
I did. Yes, I did.
And
I got some.
you followed up on that?
I did. I told the members, but they still haven't pushed as yet.
Well, okay. So I think from what little I know, I think your group really has a big issue. Well, I'm at duty most days, so Mr. Whitaker, send me an email right now, and I will try to respond to you as soon as possible. Right now, so send me an email. Sorry, let me give you your email address.
Skid papers?
Yeah, man, Skid Papers. Send me an email at Skid Papers.
When
I'm just trying to think though about when, because you see, when would this meeting be? I don't
just
know.
a brief. I mean,
brief. So you live in Kingston, you want to come here during lunchtime or something like that?
Yes, I'll be in Kingston.
I know I'm disgusting already.
All right, send me an email and I'll see if I can find a time to meet. But the thing about it, Roger, is that a meeting with you without a virtual or in person with other students, in my mind, is a problem.
Okay.
You know why? It's a group project. So if it is that 2 or 3 of the group members don't plan to finish, at the end of it, every year there's at least one group, if not more, that fail. It's very unlikely you alone is going to do the project. I know that your group is way behind, but the problem is, if I, what would be the point of this meeting with you alone? Are the other people going to come and meet virtually? What we're going to do? How we're going to move forward?
I understand.
So that needs to be part of the plan, because this is not an individual issue; it's a group issue. So that needs to be part of the consideration, because I really don't see the point of just having a one-on-one meeting.
Okay.
Unless I'm not way, even if it was I'm supervising the group, I think that needs to be more than 50% of people in a group at the meeting, preferably everybody, but certainly more than 50%. So show me an email, but it needs to be people need to come, or we need to figure out what we can do about that. Anybody
All right.
else? So I'll look out for your email, Roger. Anybody else with a pressing concern or question? So I take it that everybody else here either knows what they want to do, or they know what they're coming back next week to do, because we have a group that's going to do a presentation, and that one group will give the other group that's concerned about the prototype some feedback. There's some things that you've asked me to come back with next time. This group, Roger, wants to meet with me. So Alex, how's your group going? If I recall, 2 weeks ago, you guys, we went through your project. What's happened since then? Alex, are you there? Alex, not hearing me? Either Alex not hearing me or not caring to respond. I'm not sure which. Well, it seems to me that we are probably, nobody has any pressing question.
Yeah, that's it for now, miss, for me. Well,
So next week we'll sort out. I think I'm going to come by next week for problem solving student projects, and we're going to also have a formal presentation to prepare you for major project. I was just wanting to spend today mostly on actual issues to make sure everybody is on their way. If you really feel like you need to talk to me or another senior member of staff about research, shout us, send us an email. I'm personally feeling quite overwhelmed with a lot of work, honestly. But if you really have a pressing issue, you can reach out to me, and perhaps maybe Dr. Kesisha would also make herself available. Mr. Wed, as the program director, is also a good person to reach out to. I wish you all a good evening.
him the reply and I chatting him since he might not work properly.
Oh, but he didn't answer me. I asked him how the things are going, and okay, I see. Oh, thanks for that. How do you know? Oh, here's a question before we leave. Still don't know how to pronounce her name, whether it's Janelle or Janelle. She says, how do you know if your group is behind? Okay, so I can make a statement that almost every group is behind. Because in an ideal world, for a date of July 6th, at this point, everybody should have already collected their data and be at a point where they have a draft of chapter 4. And if you're not there, you're behind. But I say all of that to say this. You should be, if you're doing a prototype, that prototype should be well on its way. I'm not saying that to say that you can't finish, but at this point, everybody should have collected their data. The fact that there are some groups that are still just getting ethics approval to finish by July 6th is quite troubling. The good news, if there's good news, is that people who either don't present or present to the panel and actually don't pass, usually they are given a second chance to present at the end of the summer. I know that might not sound like good news, but the good news is that if you don't pass in July early, you will be given a chance to present again and still finish major project this academic year. So that's why I'm calling it good news. Oh, somebody said that is good news. So obviously we're hoping that everybody will be able to pass at the first Viva, but the good news is that there is a second chance. And by the way, guys, if that happens to you, don't waste time. I've actually seen some groups that they fail and then they come back to the final Viva, not just failing abysmally the second time. And I just go, what on earth? I mean, most groups actually definitely improve, but there are actually people who fail and then fail again. And I just go, I don't understand why students are that way. Right? So the point is, please work on your projects, and you can come back again next week, Wednesday, and we'll be giving you feedback, giving you more information. Hopefully this is of some value. I don't think there is any
Thank you.
other question. So guys, have a very good evening, and I will see you. Oh, and the last thing now is, this is really optional. So for next week, Monday, going to have a formal launch of this research lab, which is optional. So that particular thing is more to look at the big goals of the research lab and the goals going forward. But it will be sent out and it's going to be put on the, remember I said earlier, we've put in the chat again, it's going to be put on the Google Classroom. Let's put the Google Classroom, those who didn't join. So I'm going to put it in the Google Classroom so you get the notification, and it's also going to be sent out to Skit reps. Oops, I just said this is Zoe, right? That everybody deleting. So please go ahead and join this Google Classroom for Metropolitan students if you haven't done so already. And Dr. Lisa Shaw can certainly send it out to the MSISM students. Anyway, so that's it. I hope you have a pleasant evening and take care, everybody. See you next week.
Okay.
All right. Bye
Good
now.
evening.
Good evening.